Welcome to the Ascension Path with Twin Essence. I'm Lacey.
And I'm Marley, and we're your Starseed Lightworker and Psychic Medium hosts.
We're identical twins with spiritual abilities and Starseed missions on Earth. On the Ascension Path, we discuss what it's like to be identical twins serving in a spiritual capacity and provide insights into our work as Starseeds. We create a sacred space to receive channeled messages, intuitive teachings, and expansive conversations that elevate your frequency and support your evolution. Join us to learn about navigating the path to Ascension and becoming the most authentic, aligned version of you. Take what resonates and leave the rest. Welcome, listeners. Today we are going to be digging into the spectrum of polarity, meaning positively and negatively polarized beings. Positive and negative are really subjective words. So we really just assign them meaning, and it's very subjective. Same thing with when we think about good or bad or right or wrong. We're just assigning meaning to these words and using them in a subjective manner based on our own experiences. So when we think about polarization or polarity, it's really a spectrum, meaning that some are going to be more towards a positive end, others may be leaning more towards a negative end, and towards the middle we have this kind of balanced point. Lacey and I will talk a little bit more in depth about it, but we refer to it as integration. Otherwise, it can be considered like harmonized or balanced, whatever phrase you like to use. But this spectrum of polarity exists within ourselves as individuals and then across the collective, across Gaia, right? Thinking about Ascension, within us and all around us. And so I often think about polarity on this spectrum on the individual level as like shadow work, the shadow side of ourselves. So thinking about how we might have really positive sides to ourselves, where we're serving others, we're doing different things for the good of Gaia or for others in our lifetime. And then the shadow side of ourselves, which, again, saying shadow does not mean it's negative necessarily. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just this opposite side of our polarity that we have to work on balancing and harmonizing in this lifetime. If you meet someone that tries to claim they're this full 100% light being, there's never any darkness to it, that's just not accurate to how we work as humans on Earth, right? We're all a mixture of something. Obviously, doing light work, you're a higher percentage of light than you are dark, but there's just no such thing as being 100% positive. And it's kind of a misconception in any kind of spiritual path, whether it's ascension, healing, or spiritual development, that you're going to be only in the light, only existing in the light, only positive. That's just not the reality of the work and of living in this environment on Earth. We have to have both polarities. So it also makes me think of the good and bad, right and wrong. Who are we to ever tell someone what's good, what's bad, what's right or wrong? These are really just human-made terms used to describe things, right? It's the same as time. These are man-made constructs and words that we use to try and measure and justify actions and behaviors, and they're just a human-made construct. Exactly, that's what I mean when I say negative. I don't want everyone to immediately assume that it's a bad thing, right? Like shadow work's bad, or we have this deep dark side of ourselves, or darkness is all bad. It's just this polarity spectrum. And that is what we mean when we talk about ascension. It's about raising your vibration, it's about shifting with Gaia's vibration too. But a lot of that has to do with that polarity spectrum within ourselves and how we're balancing it and how we're integrating, as well as how that's going to impact the collective energy and the energy of Gaia. We're light workers. That means we work more in the light, and it does seem very positive, but that doesn't mean we don't experience shadow work or more negative experiences. If you ever meet somebody that does claim that, that's spiritual bypassing, assuming everything's positive and pretending everything's good. Like, I'm only going to think positive thoughts. That's bypassing emotions, and that can be bypassing inner healing too. And it really weaves into that concept of duality. Lacey and I have talked about that, I know, on social media before, and how Ascension really is this process of riding highs and lows. Polarity and the spectrum of polarity is a lot like duality. When we talk about duality, you're going to have both sides working with each other, integrating and harmonizing to truly ascend and truly change your frequency in the ascension process. When we talk about positively polarized beings or the positive end of the polarity spectrum, we're really referring to the purpose of serving others. So, this would be beings or human incarnations or souls that are serving the purpose in this lifetime of helping others. So, spreading light, spreading love, helping others with healing, finding ways to give back to others. I always give the example of Twin Essence with Lacey and I. Our mission tends to be one that we view as more positive on the polarity spectrum, in that we are guiding others on the path to ascension through healing, through alignment, through the transmissions that we share. Yes, it's all about serving other people and the greater good. It's about the collective consciousness. It's even things that aren't spiritual. Think of it as like a doctor, right? The Hippocratic Oath. They're here to serve people. Think of it as farmers. That's what's coming to mind with their food and how they're helping people put food on the table. So it doesn't need to just be a spiritual occupation. It can be someone that's very generous. It's ultimately somebody that's in service to something other than themselves. And again, taking a look at that spectrum within as well. Lacey and I, as an example, using Twin Essence, serving others, helping others with alignment and ascension. That does not mean that we as individuals have to completely neglect ourselves and that looking at ourselves ever is a negative thing or a bad thing. It's just balancing the spectrum within. Otherwise, we would be continuously depleted energetically. We wouldn't be able to serve the greater mission. So you can see all the levels or the scales, if you will, that polarity exists within and outside of self. For sure, it's all about balance. You can't be sacrificing yourself and never taking care of yourself. It's pouring from an empty cup if you do something like that. Looking at what negatively polarized beings, these will be your self-serving individuals. So, this is typically seen in a very dark light, I would say. So, manipulative, controlling, they lack empathy. This can be narcissistic people. They're doing harm, they're doing things for themselves. Oftentimes, they're hurting other people to get ahead with what they want in their narrative or agenda. And the example I have of that is looking at the more draconian and reptilian starseed type. I want to be clear that not all draconian and reptilian starseeds are necessarily negative. It's just that they tend to be used as more of a negatively polarized example of starseeds. This looks a lot like your politicians, and think big corporations with high power CEOs that don't really care about their company and the employees that they work with. They only care about how much money they're making. Again, just want to be clear that it's not saying all politicians or CEOs or big corporations are negative or bad. They're just examples of more of those self-serving polarity examples.
Versus serving others.
So the reptilian and draconian starseed type. These types tend to be more associated with a negatively polarized being. They're very power hungry, they tend to be narcissistic and controlling, and it is all about domination. When you think of these types, they tend to be more focused on domination and control and getting what they want from people. So it's all about serving themselves.
Versus the opposite side of the spectrum, which would be serving others. So again, just replacing the words positive and negative there, not assigning good or bad meaning to those words. Now we're just using the example of serving self versus serving other. Negative polarity, positive polarity. And how can we continue to integrate those on a large scale and within? It is possible for beings to change their polarity. So most often we have a mission or purpose and we really tend to be use the word born into our polarities or we incarnate with a certain intent, right? But it is possible to change your polarity on the spectrum, and that's something that we always work at doing as we talk about ascension and ascending with Earth. So, for example, if we're talking about moving from a negative polarity to a positive, or serving self versus serving others, that's possible. It does involve a lot of inner healing work. There's a lot of personal growth involved there, but it is possible to make that switch throughout a lifetime. The same can be said when moving from a positive polarity to a negative, or serving others to serving self. It just depends on free will and the choices that we make in our lifetimes. So, all the choices that we're making, the healing that we're going through, the paths that we're taking, the word destiny is coming up. Spirit has been bringing this up a lot for Lacey and I, using the example of fate versus destiny. Fate being it's predetermined, it's in the stars, and destiny being determined by our actions. So when we talk about free will and the actions that we make, a lot of that has to do with our different polarities and the polarities within ourselves. How are we integrating them or how are we not integrating? Are we unbalanced? Are we leaning more towards one side of the spectrum than the other? That can impact our mission. Or it could be our mission to be more towards one side of the spectrum or not to create growth within others.
100%. I think it's just as harmful to be 100% negatively polarized and self-serving, and it's equally harmful to be 100% serving others and neglecting your own needs. They're both really harmful things that you could be doing.
Extremes.
Yes, but ultimately, we really need both for growth, right? That's the whole point of this spectrum of polarity is needing both ends and everything in between to create growth while we're here. So, the spectrum of polarization includes positive and negative, but then it also has that integration point. When we talk about integration, that's that point of balance, that point of fusion, that point of harmonization where it's an equal of both, right? 50-50, positive, negative. Let's think of it that way. So I want you to picture it as a triangle with positive and negative on the bottom and the point being integration. Or you can think of it as a linear line with positive and negative on each end and integration in the middle. But ultimately, that's that neutral point where we balance out the polarities and it's equal distribution of both of them. Someone that's very integrated, that understands the power of serving the self and the power of serving others, and how to use both of those in harmony with one another.
And that's really what Lacey and I do as Starseed Lightworkers. When we talk about twin magic readings, whether it's the dual channel or the sacred container that we create through dual channeling, when we're opening that portal, creating that space with a client, it's raising their vibration, right? And it's helping them with their ascension and their alignment. That is what Lacey and I do with polarities within as well. As Starseed Lightworkers, we're helping harmonize and reach that point of integration within the individual. While we do work to harmonize and reach that integration point within individuals and the clients we work with, and within ourselves, right, our own personal healing cycles as Starseed Lightworkers, it is ultimately important to have both sides of the spectrum. So both positive and negative, both serving other, both serving self. I know we have talked about this throughout this entire episode, but in order to truly achieve ascension or grow within a lifetime or within an incarnation, you need to have experiences on both sides. You need individuals on both sides of the spectrum outside of you and within yourself.
The example that pops into my head is if someone was existing and living in this bubble of only extreme positivity and never had any point of friction or opposing beliefs or anything to actually challenge them in any way, what would be the point? How would they grow?
On a larger scale, even if everybody was at that pure positive end of the spectrum, how boring would that be? Again, removing the purpose of existing, no conflict, no growth because we're all just pure positive bliss 24/7.
That's just not the reality. When we think of Earth, I want you to think about it as an experiment, okay? Earth would have no lessons involved in it if multiple polarities did not exist. And if this spectrum wasn't around. If it was all pure positive, there would be no point to having Earth exist. And when people mention going to Earth school, other spiritual healers talk about going to Earth school to learn and grow and go through lessons. There would be no Earth school. There would be no point in being here other than to exist in this state of pure bliss. And that's just not where growth comes from. Growth comes from that friction, it comes from opposing forces. We have to have what are considered more negative experiences in order for us to learn and grow. I think everybody can point to a more negative experience and say that did teach me this though, or that did lead me to doing this. So it is what propels you forward on your path and on your journey. When we talk about ascension, this is what we're talking about. It's that duality, it's the highs and lows, it's holding space for the positive and the negative experiences. You can't ascend if you're sitting in a bubble of positivity or a bubble of negativity. That's just not how ascension works. You need both in order to grow and ascend in vibration.
As we reach those different levels of integration within polarities, we're going to continue to raise our vibration, change frequency, and then ultimately ascend with Gaia.
Reaching different integrations of polarities is part of how we ascend and raise our vibration and frequency to move to a different density. So you're always hearing us talk about 5D energetics, and Gaia is moving and shifting into a 5D reality. Well, the more we're able to integrate the different polarities, the more we're able to change our own vibration and frequency and actually shift into that 5D reality with Gaia. So it's all connected. Polarization, that's part of ascension. That's part of how Gaia is shifting and ascending as well. It's part of moving densities and it's part of raising your vibration and frequency. The spectrum and understanding where you fall in it and where you're integrating lessons and healing. It's all part of how we're ascending with Gaia.
And it can also be part of mission and purpose. So, depending on what your mission and purpose are in this lifetime, it could be different ends of that polarity spectrum, or it could be that you are working towards balancing within. We all exist for those different reasons in these incarnations.
When we talked about destiny and fate, like Marley brought up earlier, it's just popping in from spirit, thinking about soul contracts and the things that we signed up to do when we came here. There's definitely going to be those bigger things that you signed up to do, but there's also the free will part of it. There's the part about how you're going to take situations and experiences and how you're going to let those impact you and use them to make decisions later with your free will. We talked about Earth School and Earth being this big experiment with humans and how we can take these different beings with clashing and opposing viewpoints and how we can create growth on Earth so that she ultimately ascends and moves into a fourth and fifth density. It's using that to help Gaia ascend.
So, get curious about the dark and light within you, the dark and light you might experience around you. I say dark and light, again, positive or negative, good or bad, whatever word you want to assign to it that works for you. But get curious about how you can continue to integrate this spectrum within yourself and maybe even within your mission and purpose if it's not already clear to you.
Don't be scared either. It's okay to dig into the shadow work. It's okay to dig into the darker side of things. Again, light and dark, what is that? They're human-made words that we're using to describe things. So don't be scared of it. See where it takes you. You need both parts of it in yourself in order for you to grow and learn.
Remember not to meet those observations with judgment. Again, looking at this spectrum as subjective, looking at the words we use as subjective, almost view it from that integration point, that point of harmony, that point of balance that you want to achieve. I mean, I want to achieve, right? I'm trying to ascend. Meet it from that harmony point, that harmonization point, and not from judgment, and see how that helps you.
Yeah.
See how that helps you throughout your healing cycles and your process. You might notice it gives you a different lens throughout healing.
When one can truly understand the value in positive and negative polarization and that actual spectrum that we're talking about, it will help you understand the purpose that experiences and people serve here on Earth. So think about the people or things that drive you crazy or get under your skin or you just don't understand it and reflect, what purpose is that actually serving? Because oftentimes, some of those more negative, horrific things are serving as really big growth edges for humanity and the collective. So reflect on some of that and think about where you've experienced it, where you've seen it, and think about it on both ends, where you've seen really positive things too, and just how they interact with each other. It'll help you understand Gaia's ascension and your journey and your role in it a lot better.